What you see right now is the final render for this tutorial. Just follow along to get the same result. Before we start, you want to make sure you have a couple of add-ons activated. You want to go Edit, Preferences, make sure you have Node Wrangler on, and Loop Tools. I'm gonna start by deleting everything, so press A and then delete. 1 on the numpad to front orthographic view, and I'm gonna load up a couple of reference photos. So Shift A, add an image, reference, and load those images. Okay, I'm just gonna quickly name those. So I'm gonna call this one cigarette ref, and this one ash ref, like reference. So we're gonna start by adding a cylinder. So Shift A, mesh, cylinder. Before you click anything else, click this little arrow here. I'm gonna type in the exact measurement. This is going to be in the metric system. If you have imperial on, so you wanna change it in the scene here, under units, from imperial to metric. And back here, 84 millimeters, so 84 mm. And here radius 4 millimeter. And you can tell it's very small. So we need to scale those pictures down by changing the pivot point to be the 3D cursor. So S to scale it down, and press the dot and the numpad to zoom in. Scale it down again, dot and the numpad. We're almost there. 1 to orthographic view. And I'm gonna click this image and change it here under the data tab. Change it to front and opacity, and lower the opacity so it's a little bit transparent. And now zooming in, move it down, GZ. Selecting the image and the object, rotate 90 degrees, so R90, enter. I'm gonna change the opacity a little bit so we can see the colors. Selecting the object, tab to edit mode, Control R to add an edge loop, left click and move it here. Control B, move the mouse a little bit, click, and change the width to 0.5 millimeter. That's about the width of the silver line. I'm gonna move this object here, the image, and scale it so it fits about same size as this. Control R to add another edge loop, left click, right click, and move it on the x-axis, so GX minus 0.023. It's about the same area here. I'm just gonna move this over here. And I'm gonna change this one, move it up a bit, so GZ, GY, change everything here back to normal. I'm using Cycles Render Engine, and I'm gonna add a light, so Shift A, light point, GY, GZ, move it a bit here, change the power to 0.5, the radius to 0.05, just gonna move it about here, so the values are 0.015 on the x-axis, minus 0.07 on the y-axis, 0.06 on the x-axis. Shift D to duplicate this, right click and GX, move it on the x-axis about there, GY, so X would be minus 0.08, Y would be minus 0.04. These are the values. Clicking the object, if you click it and shade smooth, right click shade smooth, you have this shading issue, so it would be better to shade auto smooth. You get better shading. So clicking 1 and then tab to edit mode, Shift Z, and 3 to face selection mode. I'm gonna select all these faces, including this one here. Clicking the material tab and adding a new material, and we're gonna call it main. So this is the main part with those lines here, and I'm gonna assign those faces. Now double clicking this loop here, clicking plus to add a new material, clicking new, and we're gonna call this white and assign those faces. In this loop here, click plus and then new, and we're going to call this silver. This is the silver line, and assign the faces. Selecting those faces here, not including this one. Clicking plus, hit new, and we're going to call this filter. Hit assign, click this face here, plus, to add a new material, click new. I'm going to call this foam and click assign. Tab and Shift Z. I'm going to slide this one up, change this to shader editor, and we have all those different slots for all the materials we just created. So main, this is the main part, changing to white, and we can change the colors just so we can see the differences, and change this one to be even whiter. Silver, changing the color, anything about there. This is temporary, so filter, anything orange, and the foam, we're gonna leave it like that. Actually, we're going to start with the filter, so zooming in, I'm gonna add a noise texture, Shift A, noise. With the Node Wrangler add-on, we can press Ctrl T to add this over here, plug the factor to the base color, and I'm gonna add a color ramp in between, changing from generated to object, and I'm gonna change the scale to be 600, detail 7, roughness all the way up, and this all the way down. Position for the left flag, I'll go with 0.3, and the right one 0.52. Changing the interpolation to be constant, and let's change the colors. Left flag 0.055U, saturation 0.93, and value 0.8. And the right flag 0.09U, 0.8, saturation, same value, 0.8. And I'm gonna change the Z location just so I see something that I like. I think I'll go with 0.6. That looks nice. And changing the roughness to be 0.6. And that's about it for this material. I'm gonna lower the value for those lights. I think they're a bit too bright, so I'm gonna go with 0.4. Same on the other one. And I'm just gonna rename this cigarette. Moving to the foam material, so changing the slot to foam. I'm gonna add noise texture, so Shift A, add a noise texture, Ctrl T to have this, and change it from generated to object. I'm gonna click the factor and drop it here and type bump, and click the bump height so it's plugged into the height socket, normal to normal, and we'll change the values to scale 100, 5 detail, roughness 0.35, and this thing 3. So you can see it's very bumpy. We'll change that strength down to 0.05 and distance to 0.1 and roughness to 0.4. Moving to the next material, so changing the slot to silver, and the value here will go with 0.5 and metallic all the way up. Actually, that looks too thick, so tab to edit mode and edge select. Double click this loop here. And just gonna slide this a little bit GG. And slide it over here. That looks a bit better. And for the white slot here, I'm just gonna leave it like that. This is fine. Moving on to the next material, we're going to change to main slot here, and Shift A, add a wave texture, Control T, and change it to object to vector, and Control Shift click the wave texture. We're going to change the scale to -350 and the axis to Z axis. Distortion to 1. Details 15, distortion scale -10. And we're going to drop the color ramp here, so color. Change the left flag position to 0.05 and value to 0.73. And the right one to position 0.38 and value 0.85. And Control Shift click the principal VSDF and plug the color to the color. And we're going to organize this, so select all those nodes and Control J to add a frame here. If you don't have this menu on the right side, you just press N and we'll call it lines. Click the color and we're just gonna leave it like that. Gray is gonna fit those lines. Okay, now we're going to do this burned area, just like in the picture. We're going to start by adding a gradient texture. Control T. Change it to object. Control Shift click the gradient so we see what we have. And drop a color ramp right there. And you don't see anything happened so far. We need to change the values here, so rotation at 90. And something is happening already. And I'm gonna change here the Z scale to be 12.1 and the X location to be -0.05. I'm gonna flip those, so I'm gonna use the right flag to be on the left side at position 0.301 and this one at position 0.327. And I'm gonna change the dark color here, so the values will be 0.02, 0.85 saturation and 0.03 value. Clicking the plus button is going to add another flag in between at position 0.32 and the values will be 0.06, 0.86 and 0.52. So this is the burned area. We're going to mix this with the lines. So Control Shift click the BSDF, this is the lines. Control Shift click the color ramp. I'm gonna mix those together. So back to the principal BSDF. And I'm gonna drop a mix color right there. Change it to the B socket. And this one will be at the A socket. And instead of mix, we're gonna use multiply. So we actually want this dark area here to be transparent. I'm gonna add a transparent BSDF and put it here for now. And we're going to use the gradient texture as a factor. So from the color, click and drop it here. Use a color ramp. And left flag would be at 0.33. Same in this one, same position, 0.33. And I want the left side to be the dark value, so if it's 0 I'm on the left flag and changing the value all the way down, click in here so it says number 1 and all the way up. Now I'm gonna add a mix shader and drop it here. Plug the transparent to the lower socket and use the color from the color ramp, not the alpha, the color, as a factor. And now it's transparent. And now it looks a bit weird, but it's gonna look good in the render, don't worry. You see it's transparent. Hello! Okay. Now we don't want this straight line, we want to add some noise to it, so that's what we're gonna do. Grab those and move them a little bit to the side and shift, right click and drag so we get this reroute here. And I'm gonna drop a color mix over there. Drop it here. Add a noise texture. And plug the color to the B socket. And you see where we're heading here. Changing the values of the noise texture to be -0.5 here, scale, and detail 4.7. I'm gonna leave the rest just like that. And as the factor, we're going to use the gradient texture factor. So factor to factor, drop it there. And just gonna change the X value here to be -0.11. So we're about the same area here. And if you like, you can change the scale here or any other value, maybe the distortion, if you want to get a different result. And I'm just gonna organize this a little bit so it looks nicer. So you can move this about here. So I'm gonna select all those nodes and Control J to add this box here. And if you don't have this menu, press N. I'm gonna name it Burn and change the color to something like that, like orange. Now I'm just gonna change the roughness to 0.6. And now I want to add some bump here, so it's not that smooth, so I'm gonna move those nodes over here. I'm gonna add a noise texture, Control T, and from the factor click and drag, drop it here and type bump, choose the height socket and normal to normal. Now it's a bit stretched, so we're changing the Z scale. I'm gonna go 14.9 and the noise scale to 2. And obviously this is way too strong, so dialing down the strength to 0.05. And now it looks a bit more real. We got some wrinkles here. I think this adds to the realism. Okay, moving to the tips. So pressing this object, tab to edit mode, face selection. Select this face, Shift D and right click to leave it in the same place. Press P and separate selection. Tab to object mode and select this new object, and we're going to rename this tip. Back to edit mode, select this face and I'm going to move it on the x-axis, so GX minus 0.015, and then extrude it back to where it was, so E 0.015. Tab to object mode and then you can hide the cigarette. As you can see, it has the same materials, so we can remove all those materials in the material tab. Selecting the first one and minus to remove all of those, and click new and add a new material, call it tip. We can go to solid view mode for now and maybe change here to the background as the world so it's a bit brighter. So tab to edit mode. With this face selected, delete it, X, delete faces, and this one as well, delete this one. Edge select mode and double click this edge loop, Control F, grid fill. Same on the other side, Control F, grid fill. Adding loops here, so Control R and press 15, so adding 15 loops, press enter and right click to leave it in the same place, in the middle, and pressing 1 to vertex selection, and then A, select everything, right click, smooth vertices, and we'll go with 3 times repeating this. Tap to object mode and you can see it has this weird shading because we have the auto smooth, this one, so we're going to just click shade smooth and it's fixed. Okay, I want to move the origin point, so clicking the object, right click, set origin to geometry, and also I want to change the pivot point, so change it to individual origins and press Ctrl 4 to add 4 subdivisions modifier, and make sure the render is as well at 4. If it's too much for a computer, you can dial it down. Add another modifier. I'm gonna use displacement modifier, and it's you can tell it's a bit of a problem here. The strength, I'm gonna dial it down to 0.08, and it's pretty big. It's going to be very hard to work with because this object is an actual real world scale. It's very small, and the values here, it's just gonna be almost impossible. So I'm gonna do this trick, so scale it up. So S100, enter, Control A, apply the scale. I'm gonna scale it down, so S 0.01, enter, so it's back to the original size, but we're not gonna apply the scale this time. This is going to be the scale, 0.01, which means that everything is going to work as if it's 100 times bigger. And now, with the displacement modifier, click new, and we'll call it big, and click this one here, change it to clouds, and instead of soft we're going to use hard type with size of 0.62 and depth at 3. Back to the modifiers, I'm gonna duplicate this, duplicate it, and click here to have a new material, and we're gonna call this small with strength of 0.06. Click here and change it to soft with size of 0.09. Back to the modifiers and duplicate again and have a new one, so click here, and we're gonna call this patches with the strength of 0.01. Clicking here and change this to distorted noise, and instead of Blender Original we're gonna go with Voronoi Crackle at the amount of 0.06 and size of 0.25. Now I want to dial this down a little bit, so I'm gonna go with the colors here and color ramp. I'm gonna change the white color to be at 0.5 value. So back to the modifiers, you can see the difference. So it's like adding different sections here. It's just more detail. Okay, so let's see how it looks with the cigarette. And you see we have some intersection here, and you can see all the intersections actually in solid view mode. This is actually mainly the first displacement modifier, so we dial it down a bit to 0.05, and this is a little bit better. And then we're gonna go into edit mode, so tab, and if you want to see an edit mode, you just can enable that in the modifiers as well, and scale it down. So I'm gonna go with scale, so S 0.95, and in object mode you can see that, yeah, I don't see any intersections. And by the way, we're going to animate the burning of the cigarette, so it's quite important that we don't have any intersections. Minus 0.11 that was. Okay. Now I don't need this image anymore, so I'm gonna hide it, and I bring this one over here, so GX, and move it back a bit. Put it in position that it's nice to work with. And we're going to do the material for the tip. So if you don't see your nodes, you just press A and the dot in the numpad. And I'm gonna use a Voronoi texture. Press Ctrl T, plug the distance to the base color, and put a color ramp in between. So we're going to change some of the values here. So this is going to be 40 and distance to edge. And I'm just going to move the white flag a bit back here. And W will be 1.63, scale at 1.58, detail 6.44, and roughness at 0.7. And I'm going to change the Z scale to put it at 8. The white flag will be at position 0.027 and change it to ease, and the color for the bright color here is going to be 0.6. So this is what we have so far. If you guys like what you see, please consider subscribing to my channel. So I'm gonna take the roughness all the way up and the alpha to 0.9, so we get some light going through this. Another thing I want to have is I want those cracks. I'm gonna fix this thing here in the viewport, so view, and I'm gonna add another 0 here. Okay, so I want to add a transparent BSDF, so Shift A, transparent. I want those black lines to be actually cracks, so light will go through this. So click and drag from the transparent BSDF to add a mix shader, and Control Shift click it and plug this one here. And I'm gonna click from the Voronoi texture, click and drag it here to add another color ramp. This is going to be the factor, and plug the color to the factor. Now I'm going to change this to be constant and the white flag to be at position 0.007. And now it looks a bit weird because you can see through it, but there's nothing inside. So I'm gonna hide the cigarette for now. I'm gonna click this and duplicate, so Shift D and right click to leave it in the same place. I'm gonna scale it, so S.9, and I'm gonna leave it like that, and lower the subdivisions to 2 because we don't need that when it's inside. In the material tab, I'm gonna remove this tip. I'm gonna create a new one. I'm gonna call this tip inside. Change the color all the way to black and roughness all the way up. And now that looks a bit better. So it's transparent, it's black inside. And with the cigarette, it looks like that so far. Okay, I'm gonna hide this image for now, and let's add a burning light for the cigarette. So Shift A, light, and I'm gonna move it with the front view, orthographic view, pressing 1 and then numpad, and GX. I'm gonna move it about here, so we'll be in position 0.03 on the x-axis, and I'm gonna change the values here, so 0.01 in the power, so it's 10 milliwatts and 3 millimeter radius. And we don't see it because of the object inside. It might be too big. Let's rename it tip inside and scale it down a bit, so S.8, and move it forward a bit, so GX.001. And the light, which is this one, we can call it burn light, and let's change the color to the hue will be 0.009, saturation at 0.96, and value 0.15. And now you can see that if you move the light forward GX, it looks nice. For the smoke simulation, I'm gonna add a cube. So Shift A, add a cube here at the size of 0.1 meter. I'm gonna go to X-ray mode and front view orthographic and move it to GX.04, GZ.04, and in edit mode, I'm gonna select this face and move it up, so GZ.1. This is going to be big enough for this simulation. In the physics tab, I'm gonna add a fluid simulation, change it to domain, and leave it like that for now. And we can call it smoke domain. I'm gonna add a smoke source, so Shift A, add a mesh UV sphere at the size of 2 millimeter radius, which is going to be actually 4 millimeter dimension because this is the radius. Move it on the x-axis, so we want this to be a little bit forward than the light. Smoke should come out from this area, so let's go on x location 0.033. Back to the domain, let's change some of the settings. So I'm gonna go with 100 resolution here and time scale at 0.2, so it's gonna rise slowly, it's not gonna look very fast. And check the adaptive domain, so it's going to calculate only the areas that there's smoke in it, so it starts small and then it's gonna get bigger as much as it is needed. I'm gonna change the heat value to 0.9, so again smoke rises a bit slower, and this value here to 0.05. This is gonna give us a little bit of turbulence, so smoke is not gonna go straight up. Check the dissolve here and change the time to 25. That means that smoke is going to dissolve in time but not very quickly. And we're going to animate this to 50 frames for now and change it from replay to all, which means it's going to bake all settings at once. Back to the sphere, I'm going to rename this smoke source, add a fluid simulation, change it to be flow, and flow behavior as inflow, so this is gonna emit flow into the domain. Check the initial velocity and source to 0.5, and this is because later this object is going to move from the front to where it is now. We're gonna animate this. And now clicking the domain, we're going to bake the simulation, so click bake all. Now this might take some time, it depends on your graphics card mainly. Okay, I'm gonna add a timeline here. It's a bit hard to see something because we don't have a material yet, so having the domain selected, click new and call this smoke. And to find your nodes, I'm gonna click A and the dot in the numpad. Deleting the BSDF, adding an emission shader, and plug it into the volume. And I'm gonna add a volume info node, plug the density to the strength, and we start to see some smoke here. I'm gonna drop a math node here, change it to multiply with a value of 5. And to get more details, I'm gonna drop in between a color ramp, change it to ease, move this flag down here, click the plus button, change it all the way up to white, another plus, and move this all the way down here, change it all the way to black. And I'm gonna go from the left to the right with the positions. So the left one would be at position 0.09, next one at 0.35, next one at 0.4, and the right one at 0.9. Now I'm gonna hide those lights here. And this looks much better. We can hide the domain for now, selecting the object, and this is going to be the last frame of the animation. So we're going to move to the last frame by pressing Shift and right arrow. You're gonna animate this value. So right click, insert single keyframe, selecting the burn light, object properties, and the X location, add a keyframe, same for the smoke source. Moving to the first frame, so shift left arrow, selecting the cigarette, put a value of -0.22 and insert single keyframe. Burn light 0.038, add a keyframe, smoke source 0.041, add a keyframe. We can hide it from the viewport and render. Now if we move the timeline, this is what we have so far. You see that the pattern stays the same, the burning pattern. So I want to animate this as well. So selecting the cigarette object, in the noise texture, moving to the first frame, we're gonna add a keyframe for the distortion. Same for the last frame. We'll go to the middle to frame 125 and change the value to -0.6 and add a keyframe. And now you can see that it looks more interesting. Now I want to add some noise to the burning light, so it looks like it's flickering. So selecting the burn light, moving to the first frame, adding a keyframe to the power, same to the last keyframe, and we're going to change this to the graph editor, selecting point and power, clicking the modifiers tab and adding a noise modifier, scale of 5, strength on 0.08, 64 depth, and influence at 0.5. And this is how it looks like. Now I want to add some deformation for the ash, so it looks like it's a little bit moving over time. So selecting the tip, we're going to add another modifier here called simple deform, and the origin will choose the burning light here. Select bend, z-axis, and angle of -15. Going to the last keyframe, adding a keyframe, and then to the first frame, change it to 0 and add a keyframe. So this is how it looks right now. So it's a little bit moving over time. Now let's add a camera to the scene, so Shift A, add a camera, press 0 for camera view, and position it somewhere about here. And the location value will be 0.14 on the x-axis, minus 0.22 for the y, 0.16 for the x-axis, and rotation 61.5, 0 and 31. We'll change the focal length to 70 millimeters. Now we're gonna set up the lights, so bring back the lights in the overlays, selecting both and moving them on the y-axis, GY.1. Back to camera view. I'm gonna change the background color all the way to black. And selecting this light, move it down, GZ minus 0.5. And let's change the color of this light as well, so it's a little bit blue. So we'll go with 0.6 U and 0.4 saturation. You see it's a little bit blue here. And we can name it light under. Selecting the other light, we're going to move it on the z-axis, so GZ 0.04. And on that x-axis as well, because I want to get some reflection on the silver line there, so GX minus 0.2. Now we can see some reflection here. Change the color to 0.1 on U, 0.2 saturation, so it's a little bit yellow, and the power at 0.3 and the radius at 0.06. Now I can see we have an issue here, so we're seeing a little bit of the inside object there. So what I'm gonna do is select the tip, bring back the shader editor, and I'm gonna move the alpha all the way up and change the transmission to 0.05. Now bringing back the domain, we need to rebake this to the full 250 frames, so we need to free all, change the value to 250 here, and bake all. That's it. All you gotta do is go to the output tab and select the output folder. I'm gonna go with MPEG and encoding MP4 and high quality, and just render wherever you like, and we're all done. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out any future videos. See ya!